I kind of peeked out of the corner of my eye and got Madame Tetra-amelia giving us the one.
They sold him as a monster. He arrived as a man. On posters, they wrote the human torso. No arms, no legs, wrapped in a knit sheath like a punctuation mark at the edge of the possible.
We got something new.
Now you can do anything with eyebrow?
Crowds came for horror. Many left quiet. He learned early that pity feeds you for a night, but skill pays the winter. So he taught himself the slow miracles. Paper caught between the lips, a spill of tobacco, the twist, the tap, then a match lifted and struck by a mouth that worked like a craftsman's hand. He didn't grin. He didn't apologize. He simply made fire while 1,000 strangers forgot how to breathe. He wasn't born a legend. He was born a child into a century that hid bodies like his behind curtains sewn from kindness and shame. The midwife whispered that he would not live the week. His mother put him in a drawer lined with cloth to keep out the draft and fed him by drop and patience. He lived. The town said miracle. The family said work. Some said there were siblings. One sister who learned to lift him as if he were a priceless bowl. A brother who fought boys who shouted on the road. Records disagree, as records do when poor families move often and papers vanish in rain. What doesn't vanish is the rumor that the children learned to team carry him before they learned long division. Doctors would later argue over the cause, a rare congenital absence of limbs, perhaps an infection in the womb, perhaps nothing to diagnose beyond the impossible luck of being born at all. He paid for every opinion in pain, pressure sores where bone met wood, stiff back from years of balancing, jaw aches from doing a lifetime's worth of gripping with his teeth. Winters brought bronchitis and the fear that a common cold would end an uncommon life. He kept a cloth nearby to catch the coughs and a joke nearby to deflect the pity. The stage found him the way stages do, through the door marked money. The only stable job for a body like his was to own the stair before it owned him. He moved like water in a bottle, shoulders rippling, hips snapping, a roll, a pivot, a glide across boards. He could climb a chair and sit regal as a pillar. He wrote by mouth, shaved by mouth, opened envelopes by mouth. He learned to land a joke with a glance and to land a room with a silence. The rules of the stare he learned by heart. Move slow, reveal clean, no gore, no apology, and never let them decide what you are before you speak. Backstage, he counted money like a broker. He knew the take before the box man did. He argued for percentages, settled for day rates only when snow threatened, and kept a ledger in his head of who could be trusted when the weather turned. He hated managers who called him boy, loved cooks who learned his tea exactly, and tipped porters who didn't stare. He had friends, giants with sore backs, little people with huge laughs, tattooed men who knew scripture by heart, a bearded lady whose lullabies could still a riot. They called each other by stage names. They called each other home. And then there was her, Violetta, the limbless lady. No arms, no legs, not a wound, a presence. Behind the curtain, their lives looked the same. Where he owned silence with a cigarette, she ruled it with stillness. Pearls, satin, a teacup lifted without a spill. A name written by mouth while the room remembered its manners. Did they ever cross road or meet? The route books won't confess. No poster survives with both names. But lot lore swears there was a coastal summer, 2 tents apart, when both bands cut out at 9. In one, a man coaxed fire from a match. In the other, a woman drew a perfect signature and raised a cup steady as a vow. The hush was so deep you could hear the ocean argue with the pilings. And the rumors from that week? That Prince Randian sent flowers with a card that just said, respect. That after hours they shared quiet tea, 2 professionals trading maps of pain and craft. No spectacle, just sovereigns comparing kingdoms. Believe the paper if you like. Believe the witnesses if you dare. Either way, comment below what you think happened when they met. And then there was her. The tent says love is a trick. The road says love is a meal plan and a map. They built both. With his wife, Princess Sarah, he raised a family. Mary, Richard, Elizabeth, Wilhelmina, and a 5th whose name the clippings kept losing between seasons and storms. Off stage, the routine changed. Night bottles balanced against a shoulder. Lullabies timed to his breath. Jokes told soft in the doorway so no one woke. Whatever the root book said about miles and money, the ledger at home read the same word over and over. Father. She learned the choreography of mornings. Warm cloth, careful dry, shirt over knit, chair at the right angle, tools placed where a mouth could reach without strain. He learned the choreography of respect. Ask, don't apologize. Explain, don't demand. Say stop when pain gets loud and thank you when it quiets. They had codes. A brush of her cheek meant enough questions from the curious. A tap of his chin on the tabletop meant closer. A long breath meant give me a minute. When winter gnawed, she read to him until the rhythm of her voice matched his pulse. When summer deepened, they shut the door and let the tent keep its gossip. Intimacy is a private country. They learned its roads with patience, laughter, and the occasional swear. People asked the question they were ashamed to say aloud. How did you know? He answered kindly once to a boy who asked without malice. We learned, and left it there, because consent does not owe anyone a map. Back of the wagon rumors said they invented a pillow bridge of folded towels, that a scarf tied just so became a loop for leverage, that they kept a shorthand language of left tilt, right tilt, breathe, that meant far more than its words. A kinder rumor said he could trace a heart with the tip of his tongue on the back of her hand, perfect every time. Believe what you like. They believed each other. He wanted a child. The town said don't. Life said maybe. Love said try. He learned to hold without hands. The hollow of his shoulder became a cradle. Breath became a lullaby. Visitors asked if it was safe. He smiled, a small, tired, undefeated smile, and the baby slept. The act evolved. The cigarette remained the crown, but he added feats the posters rarely told. A letter written in the stubborn script, a button collar, a coin lifted from a table by lip alone, a card trick played on the floor with a cigarette that never shook. He studied breaths like beats in music, where to inhale, where to hold, where to let the room fall into the silence he made. He asked the band to stop during the cigarette. Noise allows cruelty. Silence forces a choice. Mostly, audiences chose awe. He refused the lines where the public could touch. It cost money. It bought dignity. He asked the ballyhoo man to retire the word monster and try marvel. When the evening line curled past the saltwater taffy and into the street, the poster changed by sunset. A filmmaker came through, a quiet man with a camera and a promise to show the truth without speeches. One brief scene made the reel. A table, a face, the slow assembly of a cigarette, a match struck and lifted, the flare reflected in an eye that had seen too much and refused to dim. In theaters, people laughed at first, shock forcing its way out, then stopped, because there is nothing funny about competence. There were illnesses. The road is a church for infections. He fought bronchitis, sores that would not close, fevers that turned the world thin. A careless heater left a scar across the knit where flame tried to take more than applause. Once, a cheap medicine took his appetite for a week and left him weak enough that the chair felt like a mountain. He learned to schedule rest days the way other performers scheduled matinees. There were enemies. A promoter who printed a fake backstory about witches, a gossip who tried to sell photographs of him dressing, a newspaper that used the word pitiful. He beat them the way he beat everything else, by outperforming the lie. And there were legends, never verified, passed from mouth to mouth where beer is cheap and memory is generous. That he once headbutted a drunk who lunged at his partner and dropped the man like a sack of oysters. That he carved a toy whistle for a child with a pocket knife clamped in his teeth, and it played a low, perfect note. That he could pick a padlock faster than a roustabout with tools, learned from a locksmith who took pity and ended up learning awe. That he gambled with marked matchboxes, out-cheating a cheat, and then buying the man dinner. That he sent anonymous money to a widow from the show who never knew who kept the baby in shoes. That he and his partner were married twice, once in church for God and once at midnight on the lot, with the band playing soft and everyone crying the way performers cry when they recognize their own. Believe what you like. Backstage, the people who mattered believed he was good. Money remained a weather system. They moved with it. When a manager tried to short him, He gathered the cast and told the week's receipts in numbers so clean the liar blushed. When a hotel forced them through the kitchen, he slept in the wagon and the next night sold more tickets than the headliner. When the ledger went into the black, he bought a second-hand heater and swore never again to winter in canvas. He loved small luxuries, a barber who understood his scalp, a clean collar, tea lined up just so, the rhythm of his partner's breathing when the pain finally let go. He loved letters from a preacher's wife in a town they'd never returned to who wrote, "You made me rethink what God meant when he said image." He saved that letter in a tin with a dented lid and carried it across 3 states. Once a paper called him a saint. He didn't like that either. Saints live in stained glass. He lived in rooms where the heater rattled and the rent came due. He preferred worker. He preferred performer. He preferred man. The carnival changed with the century. Laws came and went. Audiences decided to be moral in public and curious in private. He adapted. When a city insisted on medical inspection, he showed up early, jaw set, and passed with sarcasm. When another city banned the word freak from posters, he smiled because he'd already banned it from his mouth. There were nights when pain shouted him off stage. There were mornings when the mirror offered a stranger and he bowed to him anyway. There were seasons when money was tight and he let a cheaper manager book them into tough towns, then paid for it with thrown bottles and a bruise that looked like a continent. He told the same joke on those nights. Tomorrow we play Paris. Paris was any town with a warm room and a manager who paid on time. The cigarette remained the crown, not because it was most impossible, but because it was the most ordinary thing done the most extraordinary way. Skill turned into a sermon, fire as punctuation. The crowd saw a trick. He saw a contract. You stare, I show you discipline. You clap, I go home paid and unashamed. He believed in consent long before the word had posters. He defined his limits in a time that didn't believe he had any to define. He believed in craft, that the most radical thing you can do in a cruel room is execute a skill cleanly, repeatedly, undeniably. He believed in rest when pain demanded it and in work when it didn't. He believed that shame belonged to anyone who stared without paying. He outlived managers, tents, and some friends. A strong man died young. A sword swallower coughed blood and would not stop. A bearded lady shaved off her legend and tried to keep the world from recognizing her grief. He stood at funerals on the ground, upright as stone on the chair, and let the band play something soft. The road is a family that loses people loudly. He died in the 1930s after a show on the far side of a shift like 1,000 other working men. Not a ghoul's ending, a performer's curtain. The carnival rolled on, leaving his town behind, leaving the chair and the table and the cigarette tin with the dented lid. The camera reel survived. So did the stories. What did the world keep? A minute of film where a man manufactures fire without hands. A handful of posters where monster fades and Marvel holds. And the quiet testimony of people who work the lot. That a body without limbs can still be a home. That a stage rented under bad terms can still become a throne. That dignity is not something you are given. It is something you build match by match, ledger by ledger, kiss by careful kiss. So the question changes. Not how did he do it? We've shown you the choreography. The better question is, why did we need him to be a monster before we allowed him to be a man? Before you go, share your thoughts in the comments below. Is the sideshow a crime or a contract? Does dignity survive a ticket line if the person on stage writes the rules? Comment below this video with what you believe and why, and subscribe for the next true story where medicine meets myth. Have you heard the story of Frank Lentini, the man with 3 legs and 4 feet? Doctors called it a parasitic twin. The crowds called it impossible. Lentini called it a career. He could stand on 2 legs and kick a football with the third, lace 2 shoes while the extra foot tapped time, and turn a stare into applause. They sold him as a freak. He sold skill, and he won. If you think tonight was wild, wait until you meet Lentini. Tap the video on your screen now. 4 feet but only 3 legs? And I'll show you the moments the posters never printed. Comment below what shocked you most tonight, and subscribe for the next true story where medicine meets myth. Thank you for watching. Yes, you can click it now.